Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Word for Kids. I'm Jaymie, and I'm guiding you through the book of Genesis in a series of 20 episodes. Last time we talked about Abraham's faith in God's promises. God had promised Abram many descendants, and even though he was old and had no children yet, he believed God. Because he believed God, he was counted as righteous in a right relationship with God. Let's see what happens next in Abram's story. Are you ready for today's adventure? Let's go! God promised Abram many offspring several times. When Abram was 99 years old, God reaffirmed this promise to Abram, and when he did this, he gave Abram a new name, Abraham. Abraham means a father of many nations. He also renamed Sarai to Sarah when he promised her a son. Sarah means princess of many. So from this point on, when you hear me talk about Abraham and Sarah, know that these are the same as Abram and Sarah from earlier episodes. Okay, moving on. So God had promised Sarah a son, and the Lord delivered on his promise. He gave Sarah a son. She became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. They named their son Isaac. When he was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded him. For now, we don't need to go into exactly what that means, except to say that Abraham was obedient to God and did as God told him to do. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." This is such a fun part of the story of God's people. Have you ever seen something so out of the ordinary that all you could do was laugh? Well, having a baby at 100 years old is very out of the ordinary. In fact, it was so out of the ordinary that Sarah laughed out loud at the birth of her son. And she knew everyone who heard about an old woman giving birth to a baby would laugh too. God told Abraham and Sarah that they would have a son, and they did, but it was not how they would have planned things for themselves, which is why God kept reaffirming to Abraham that he would give him many descendants. This is a great story to turn to when we struggle with trusting God. In a human's mind, having a baby at an old age is not the most ideal way to start a family, but God had a perfect plan. Sometime later, God tested... Oh, that sound means it's time for the word of the day.
Test. A challenge given to someone by God to prove their trust in Him. Test.
Thank you. Okay, so as we said, sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," Abraham replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on the mountain I will show you." Whoa, it is hard to understand why God would ask such a thing from one of his children. This is a scary thing to think about even for adults like me today. God was using this as a test for Abraham to see if Abraham trusted God fully. After all, God had promised Abraham many descendants, but here he was asking him to sacrifice his son. Would Abraham trust and obey God? Let's find out. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for my burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told them about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his own son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." So Abraham passed the test. God tested him to find out if he would trust and obey him even in the most unthinkable way, sacrificing his son. Abraham did trust God, and God gave him a way out, a ram to be sacrificed in Isaac's place. Next, the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me." So, as we've said several times in the last couple episodes, Abraham believed God. He trusted him and obeyed. And because of this, God blessed Abraham. Not only did he bless Abraham, but he blessed his descendants, who would become all of the nations on earth. That leads us right to this week's verse to remember. This week's verse is actually the end of one verse and the beginning of another verse. Genesis 22:16b and 17a. Because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. One more time. Because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you. Genesis 22:16b and 17a. Okay, that's all the time we have for this episode. I can't wait to see you again soon for another episode of The Word for Kids.